Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Born to Heal podcast. I'm Dr. Katie Deming, your host. And today we're diving into the power of intuition, starting with the groundbreaking work of Dr. Kelly Turner, who studied 1,500 cancer survivors who experienced radical remissions. Radical remission is an unexpected recovery that defies medical odds. And in Kelly's book, Radical Remission, she identified 10 key factors these survivors who had radical remission shared in common, including following their intuition. And this offers us profound insights into how trusting our inner wisdom can transform health and healing. So that's what we want to talk about today is how do we follow our intuition? What is it? What is intuition? How do we tune into it? And how do we follow it, not only in our everyday life, but specifically around healing? So I want to start with just a definition of what is intuition. So intuition, the definition reads, attaining direct knowledge or cognition without evident rational thought and inference, or immediate apprehension or cognition. And I think all of us know what it is. You know, it's funny when I read that definition, I'm like, I don't know what that means exactly, but I know it when I feel it. And intuition is that knowing that you cannot explain with rational thought or knowledge, something that you just know to be true without having studied it, without information to tell you, yes, this is true, what I'm feeling. And I'll give you an example that I think all of us can relate to. It's that feeling where you have like the hair on the back of your head stands up and tells you something is not right here. And I think all of us have had that experience where we have that feeling and then we ignore it. And later we realize, oh, you know what? I knew that. I knew that I should have stopped right there. I had that intuition that something was off, but it didn't make rational sense. So I just followed through and then later realized, oh yeah, I knew something was wrong without knowing and like having the facts to say, okay, yes, this is not something that is meant for me, or this person is not good for me, or whatever it is. We've all had that experience. And I think most of us have had the experience where we haven't listened to that information and then later regretted it. You know, purchasing something that you had this feeling like, oh, I like want this so bad, but something just feels off. And we push through because that intuition doesn't make rational sense. But later we realize like, oh, I actually had that internal knowing that I shouldn't have moved forward with that. And I pushed through anyway. That is your intuition. And that is very powerful information. And one of the things that has really shifted for me in my career and also in my life is that I used to blow past my intuition. I had very strong intuitive knowings about things, but I would just push through because it didn't make sense. It would logically didn't make sense what was coming through with my intuition. And so I would just move forward and then later realize like, oh, that was actually not the right thing for me to do. So what I want to talk about is I want to talk about some examples so that you guys can see how this plays out. What does it look like to follow your intuition? And then I'm also going to teach you some ways that you can deepen your own intuition and practice this, because intuition is like a muscle. When we ignore it, it gets weaker. And when we pay attention to it, we strengthen it. And so I want you to start using your intuition in little ways so that you can build up that muscle so that when you need it in big decisions, you have that information available to you and you know how to tap into it, you know how to follow it, and you know kind of what are some of the things that are signs like, oh, this might be my intuition that's coming up. So for me, with my decision to leave Western medicine, which I feel like it was less a decision and more like a push to leave, I was getting these intuitive knowings about that for at least a year. So I don't remember exactly when they started, but I remember in 2019 having several conversations with my husband where I was like, I have this feeling that I'm not supposed to be practicing radiation oncology anymore. And all of you who've heard my story before know that this didn't make sense, right? So I had trained until I was 32 years old to become a radiation oncologist. I had spent my life training to do this. I loved working with people who were dealing with cancer, and I really loved my job. Like, I loved the role that I played and the intimate relationships that I had with my patients. I, enjoyed being with my colleagues, but there was something in me that was saying, this is not for you anymore. And it made no sense rationally, because what would I do if I wasn't a radiation oncologist, since I had spent all my life basically training and didn't have my first job until I was 32? If I wanted to do something else, that would mean I would go back to training, and that could take years, or I didn't know what it meant. And so I had that little voice, that little internal knowing creeping in and saying, hey, like, you're not supposed to be doing this anymore. And what I did was I rationalized it and I said, well, that makes no sense logically, because clearly I've spent my whole life training for this career. I make a good living. And it was basically my whole life was wrapped up in this career choice. And on top of that, my husband didn't understand this and thought actually something was wrong with me, because he was like, if you're not happy, then, maybe something's wrong with you if you're not happy having a good job that pays well, meaningful work, colleagues and patients that love you. Like, what else do you want? And what he didn't know is it wasn't about me not being happy. I was happy, actually. It was this knowing, and this was this little voice that was telling me something inside, something needed to change, but I couldn't make rational sense of it. So what did I do? I ignored it. And if you've had experiences like this where you've gotten a knowing and then you ignore it, what happens is that the first, piece of information is like maybe a whisper. And probably I had the whispers before I had this, information about needing to leave in 2019. And I probably just blew past those two because it just didn't make sense. But it wasn't until 2020, when I had my shared death experience, that it was like, I felt like I had been hit over the head with like a frying pan. Like, you've been ignoring this. This information is real and it's really coming through. And so now we're going to show you in this really big way. And so I had my shared death experience, which is very similar to a near-death experience. And I experienced the love and the light and everything that is outside this reality that people who have near-death experiences have. And when I came back after that experience, I was different. I can't quite explain how I was different, but the one thing that I knew for sure was that I had to leave. And I had no idea what I was supposed to do. Like, I didn't know whether I was supposed to leave and like leave healing altogether, but I felt so connected with people who were dealing with cancer that I couldn't figure it out. But all that I knew was like I had to drop it. I had to make the decision to let it go, and it didn't make any sense. Logically, it made zero sense. And it also had big implications in my life, because my life blew up as I knew it. All of a sudden, my career that I had, built a lifetime around, my marriage fell apart because my husband didn't understand this like big change. He thought maybe I was having a midlife crisis. But I knew after that event that if I did not do this, I would regret it for the rest of my life. And that I also didn't need to see where the path was going. I needed to just let go of what was clear. Like, it was very clear, this is something you need to let go. And if I didn't let it go, I felt like the next sign would be something like maybe I would get sick or something really bad would happen because I was ignoring this information. And so for you in your life, there are things that you know that you may be ignoring. And actually, I think one of the things when someone is diagnosed with a serious health condition, it could be cancer, but it could be something else. It's a sign that something in your life needs to change. And one of the things that I know now that I'm practicing in this new way is that you know what that is. Like, you know it. You just don't want to admit it. And so you don't admit it and you pretend like it's not there. And the signs are getting stronger, right? It started as a whisper. I don't know what that was for you. And then it was like, the voice in your ear, like that for me, you need to leave. And then maybe it's this illness is your frying pan over the head moment where you're like, oh gosh, something needs to change. But my question for you is this, is that your intuition is not going to make sense. And so even if it's not tied to the diagnosis, but you know that something is off in your life and you ignore it, more problems will come, more crises will come until you acknowledge and you make that change that needs to happen. I don't know what it is for you. I don't know if it's a relationship that's toxic, that you know is wrong, but somehow it's that security that you've held on to and that you don't know how you would make it without that relationship. Maybe it's a job that's making you sick or is not aligned. Or maybe it's, how you're spending your time. Maybe it's habits. I don't know what it is. But if you continue to ignore it, the signs will get stronger. And you can't ignore it. And I think this is interesting because I don't think that Kelly talks about intuition in this way in Radical Remission. I think she talks about it in intuition in your treatments and like what's right for you. And I think that's really important. And we're going to talk about that. But I think the biggest piece around intuition for all of you that are listening is that there's something in your life that's not aligned and you know it and you ignore it. And you pretend like it's not there and you can keep things going, but it's under the surface and that it's causing disharmony within you. And until you acknowledge it and do the scary thing, I don't know what that is for you, but I know that it's scary because I've been there. I mean, like you can hear it in my voice when I talk about my story. It's scary. It's scary when you have this sign and you're like, I've got to be doing something different. And I have no idea how I'm going to do that. And I have no idea how I'm going to make a living. And losing potentially everything that you have to make these decisions is scary. So I just want to say that I see you and I know that it's hard, but I also know that once you make the decision to let go of whatever that is that's not aligned or to follow something that's terrifying you, that's where your magic is. That's where your healing is. That's where everything that you've been looking for, it's on the other side of moving past that fear. And so I think this is one thing too with intuition is people think like, oh, if it's intuitive, it's going to be so gentle and kind and everything's going to open up and it's going to be rainbows and roses. And I'm here to tell you that that's not the case. And maybe it will be for you. But most of the time, our intuition is leading us to something that terrifies us. And it's something that you do not want to do. And that resistance is actually a sign that maybe that is the exact thing that you want to do or that you need to do. You don't want to do it. I want to take that back. You don't want to do it. You need to do it. And I'll give you an example. Actually, another example for me is with the fasting. Like I didn't want to do prolonged water fasting with people. That terrified me. I was like, that sounds dangerous, but it kept showing up and I kept getting these signs and I kept having this feeling like, oh, I'm supposed to be doing this. And I was like, I don't know why, because it's scary for me. And like, can't anything be easy? I had this big shift out of Western medicine and that felt like a big deal. And then I was like, okay, well, now it'll be easy. Well, the truth is that our intuition is always speaking to us. And it's often showing us the things that scare us the most. And that's where we're being called to go towards. So if there's something that scares you, but your heart feels pulled towards it, that's your intuition. And the more you can step into the fear and just do it anyway, you're going to uncover things about your life that you just didn't know was possible. And I think another thing about this is that planning, we are so conditioned to plan out our lives, plan out, our cancer treatments. I'm going to do it like this. And then if this doesn't work, then I'm going to do this. And the truth is that I don't plan anymore. I create kind of loose plans, but my business is like 100% intuitive. The way that I've developed my business is like 100% following where I'm being led to go. And when I create plans, I actually miss the intuitive guidance that I'm receiving because I'm so focused on, but I'm going here. And like, why is all this other stuff showing up? And it seems like it's a hassle and it's in the way. But the truth is that that plan came from my rational mind, which was trying to create something that actually was never meant for me in the first place. And so I encourage you too, as you think about your life, your plans for your treatments or whatever it is that you're doing, is that you hold those very loosely and you listen to that inner voice, and you also pay attention to the signs. So one of the things that you're going to need to do in order to follow your intuition is to be aware when signs come in so that you can follow them. And I'll give you a couple examples of this because your intuition, like the signs that come in and the intuition that you have, is often going to seem illogical. It may seem embarrassing. It may seem like it doesn't make sense. And I follow it now anyway. Like, because I know, and actually if something really doesn't make sense but's calling me, I'm like, okay, I got to do it. And that's going to be embarrassing or terrifying or whatever it is. And you guys know that I'm not afraid to be embarrassed now. I'm like, I'm not afraid to be a fool because I realize that those times when I've stepped outside and followed my intuition, lo and behold, it was exactly where I was supposed to be. So I'll give you an example of this. This was before I left Western medicine. I had already made the decision to leave, but I was still practicing. And so I was in my clinic and I was meditating during my lunch hour. And I had this vision during my meditation and I saw the TED symbol and I saw this woman's face. And the woman I didn't know personally. Like, I knew her. We had been in a group together, but I had never like spoken to her one-on-one. We were both in this online program for speakers. And so I had been in this cohort with her, but I had never communicated with her directly. And I had this vision and my intuition says, you need to do something with this. You need to like message her. And inside I was like, what am I going to say to this woman? I don't even know her. I'm going to be like, hey, Bryn, I had a vision, your face and a TED symbol. I don't know what that means, but I was like, yeah, I guess that's what I'm going to say because I don't know what else to say. And I know I'm supposed to follow this. So that's what I did that same afternoon. I was like, this is embarrassing, but I'm just going to do it. And so I sent an email to Bryn. If you're listening, Bryn, I love you. And Bryn was amazing. I said, Bryn, I don't know what this means, but I was meditating today and I saw your face and I saw the TED symbol. And I just wanted to reach out and see if that means anything for you. And I didn't know if that message was for me or if it was for Bryn. Maybe Bryn was supposed to be giving a TED Talk. I didn't know. And so I reached out to her and she, being the kind-hearted, just sweet person that she is, was like, wow, that's amazing. Your higher self is right on because I am on the TEDx Reno selection committee and we have 7 days open in our selection period. She's like, do you have a TED Talk? And I was like, I don't know. And I was like, but I'm like, clearly something's coming through here. So she said, let's hop on a call. We hopped on a call the next day. And within 3 days, I had submitted an application for my TEDx talk that I gave in the summer of 2022, thanks to Bryn's welcoming, receipt of that strange email that I sent. But that is a perfect example of where I think a lot of us would ignore that. It's like, oh, I don't know what to do with this. This is weird. but I clearly had that feeling like this is information that I'm supposed to act on. And now I know, like if I get a message about something or like have some intuition, I follow it. Even if it doesn't lead to anything, it's fine. Now I don't get embarrassed. But if I had not sent that email, I would not have given a TEDx talk in the summer of 2022. It's that simple. So I think it's important for you guys to realize that sometimes your intuition is going to lead you to do something that seems silly or foolish or weird, but it is always leading you where you're meant to go. And I'm going to share another story because I love these stories because I think it's so powerful to see how you don't, like, that's an example of people have TEDx, like giving a TEDx talk is like on their bucket list. And they're like, for years, like working to manifest this and create it. And I was like, of course, I would love to give a TEDx talk at some point in my life, but I did not put any effort into that, except for obviously once, I got the application approved and accepted. Of course, there was lots of work that went into giving the talk, but in terms of like, I really didn't have to do a lot. I just had to follow the signs and follow my intuition. But another example of this was in 2023. So after I got my divorce, I had said, I'm not going to date. Like, I was just like, for me, it wasn't important to, like, dating was not on my list. I was like, it's fine. I've now been divorced twice. I'm like, if I'm meant to meet someone, I will meet them, but I am absolutely not worried about that. And I'm not going to do online dating because I had a friend who she had just told me horror stories over the years, like had witnessed her doing these dates that were just like, oh my goodness, I could tell you stories, but I'm not going to do that. One of my dear friends just really had some crazy experiences on online dating. And I was like, I'm just not going to do it. If I'm meant to meet someone, I'm going to meet them. And so on May 11th, 2023, that friend actually, the one who I'd seen, on online dating, and I'd been like, oh my gosh, I could never do that. She had come up to visit me. I had just gotten 2 kittens, Goose and Milo, that maybe you guys have seen on my Instagram stories, but I had just gotten them and she was up in Portland for the day. So she stopped by, and on that day, she said to me, she's like, why don't you just go on to like some, I forget what she was saying, like, some online dating thing. And I was like, I told you, I'm like, I'm never doing it. I absolutely will never do online dating. And she's like, well, maybe you'll change your mind at some point. I was like, I know, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to do that. So, and this is a very good example of never say never. But so that happened that afternoon. I don't know. It was like sometime like 4:00 in the afternoon. I was like, I am never going on online dating. And I had been saying this for like a year. So that night at midnight, I don't know what I was doing up at midnight because I literally fall asleep really early. I'm usually asleep at like 9 p.m. But at midnight, I'm still awake and I hear this message, go on Bumble, which Bumble, for those of you who don't know, is an online dating site. And I didn't even know what it was. So I had to look it up and I was like, no, I literally just said that I'm not going on online dating. But I know how to tap into my intuition. I'm going to teach you guys after I tell you this story, how to tap into it. So I checked and I was like, am I really supposed to do this? And the answer was yes. And I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, okay, well, number one, it's embarrassing because I've been saying for a year that I would never do this. But number two, I was like, I had no idea what I was doing. I hadn't planned this. I didn't have photos. I didn't have a profile, like what I was going to write on there. But I knew I was supposed to go on there. So I spent like 2 hours, created a profile, threw up some pictures, and then that was like, took me like 2 hours. So it was like 2:00 in the morning at this point. And then I start looking through the men on there and I was like, okay, this is exactly why I didn't want to do online dating because this is horrible. Like this just sea of men that I was like not interested in. And there was one guy whose pictures were kind of in color. And I was like, okay, I liked him. And then I like didn't like anyone else. And by 2:30, I was done. I was like, this is exactly why I didn't want to go on here. I'm like, I really don't like this process. And I'm not interested in dating. So I went to sleep at like 4:00 in the morning. I woke up freaked out. I was like, you did what? you created a profile on Bumble? Like, what are you doing? So I woke up and I was like, how do I delete my account? But it wouldn't let me delete. The only thing that I could see was to make myself invisible. But apparently when you make yourself invisible, anyone that you've liked can still see you, but nobody else could see you. So I went to bed, and then sometime the next morning, that guy reached back out to me, and we ended up starting talking. And behold, he was trying to sign off of the app on that night, like on May 11th, the night, at midnight, May 12th, when I got the message to go on there. That night at like 10 o'clock, he was trying to delete his account and go off because he had been through a divorce like 3.5 years before, and had basically, his wife had asked him for a divorce, and he realized that he had been really selfish in his marriage because he was a professional cyclist and had been really self-focused. And when his wife asked him for a divorce, it really shook him. And so he spent 3.5 years working on himself in therapy. He wanted to make himself a better person, but then also a better partner for the next woman that he would be with. He had started dating about 6 months before, when he finally felt like, after 3 years of being by himself, he was like, okay, I finally, or his therapist said, well, I think you're ready. You need to go out and look, now that you've done all this work, now you need to go look for someone. And so he had been looking and dating, and he'd gone out on he'd went out with like 6 women. And each woman, he was like, I'm going to go out with 2 dates so that way I can make sure. And he's just like, nothing. He's just like, I'm not finding what I'm looking for, and I'm not really interested in this process. And so he decided that he was going to go off the app for the summer and, just ride his dirt bike and bicycle as well. And so he was just going to take the summer off. And he was, on May 11th, was trying to figure out how to get off the app, but he could not figure it out that night. He was too tired, and he's like, okay, whatever. I think his subscription was going to renew like 2 days later. So he needed to get off within the next day. And so he's like, I'll just, in the morning when I get up, then I'll just basically, cancel my subscription. And he had also made a list with his therapist of the woman that he was looking for, because she was like, well, if you're not finding, if it's not a match, like, what are you actually looking for? So he had made this list with her. And so on his list was, she's 5'1", and she has blonde hair, and it's in a bob, and she's athletic, and she's smart, and basically describing me. And so when he wakes up in the morning on May 12th, which happens to be, May 12th is my mentor Don Javier's birthday, which is not lost on me that this all happened on his birthday. But basically the next morning, when he logged on to Bumble to delete his account and cancel his subscription, basically what he had been looking for all along was like the first person that popped up. And he thought someone was pranking him. His best friend is like the head of Homeland Security in the Middle East and can actually do some, kind of sneaky things, like we'll call him from his own phone number and that kind of things. And so he thought, the first thought that he had was, oh, Tony's playing a trick on me, to put this woman who's clearly like everything that I've been asking for, right on the app as I'm about to delete it. And long story short, obviously, we connected and we've been together ever since, a little over 2 years now. But if I hadn't listened to my intuition that night, like if I hadn't followed it that night, he and I would have never connected. And I knew that, when I had that sense, like, you need to go on there now. Like, I knew that, and it made no sense. And I'm not someone who stays up late anyway. So this whole thing was just so unusual for me, but I knew it was an intuitive knowing something was coming through. And so now the way that I live my life is I follow that. And by following that, something like incredibly magical opened up. And I met this man who's just like the best partner that I've ever had, who, appreciates me in ways that I've never been appreciated, but I would have missed that if I hadn't followed my intuition. So what I want to teach you is, how do you tune into that? Like, how do you tap into your own intuition? And the first thing that I think is important is just to be aware. just to be paying attention, not so focused on what you're planning that you're not open to other possibilities. Because the truth is that what the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, has in store for you is much bigger, much grander than what you could ever create and visualize yourself. If you use your mind to say, like, this is what I want, I'll guarantee that the universe has something better planned for you, that the universe has something that's even bigger if you can release the plans and pay attention to the signs that are coming in. So that's the first thing, is you want to be aware and paying attention to these little nudges that you're getting, and that they're not going to make sense rationally, logically. People might think you're a little weird or crazy for some of the things that come through, but that usually means that you're on the right track. So that's the first thing, is just being aware of the signs and paying attention and recognizing that it likely will make no logical sense. But then the next thing is that we all actually have internal signals of yes and no within our body that can help us determine, okay, do I follow this or do I wait? What do I do with this information? And that is basically your internal compass. Some people use muscle testing, but I'll tell you that muscle testing is not reliable on the planet anymore, because there's some big shifts that have been happening with the magnetics on the planet. And I don't know if you've read this, but the Earth's core started rotating in the opposite direction. They started tracking this. I feel like maybe it was in the summer of 2024 when the scientists first recognized this. We had heard this from Don Javier earlier than that. Like, I think it was maybe April of 2023 where he told us that that was happening, but then the scientists started to recognize it. But basically, with these shifts that are happening on the planet, it impacts muscle testing and the accuracy of muscle testing. So I don't use muscle testing to check my intuition. I tap into my internal yes and no signals. And I have a guide, actually, we'll include that. I have a free guide on how to do this in this practice. But basically, we each have a yes and no signal inside us. But the important thing is that you have to ask yes, no questions to get information from your internal guidance system. So I'll give you just an example. Like, one of the ways that you can tap into this information inside you is by asking yourself yes, no questions, or saying things that you know are either a yes or a no, and tapping into what signal comes through. So an example of this is that you can say, I love, and then the name of someone that you love unequivocally. For me, I always use one of my children, and I'll say, I love Sonika. And I'll say that, and then I'll tap into, what do I feel in my body when I say that? And for me, I have like an opening that happens. It used to be that the opening was in my chest. It felt like almost like an air vent opened up and was like blowing up air in my chest. Mine has shifted now, and now it's like a little like feeling like upward air in my head, but basically the same kind of opening feeling. That's my yes. So when I say, I love Sonika, and then I get quiet and I tap into that, I can feel this yes signal opening inside me. And then if I use the same thing and say, I love, and then pick someone that I do not love, or someone who is, basically like I have strong negative feelings towards, that will give me my no. And for me, if I say I love and then something that I don't love, what happens is that I get like a downward feeling of like a closing, and it's more in my pelvis. And I practiced that to see. So I would test with things that I knew were a yes and I knew were a no, to tune in to see what were those signals and were they consistent for me. So another example is, you can say for a yes is, my name is, and then say your name. So I would say, my name is Katie. And I can actually feel that just like opens for me. Like I have this little like opening in my forehead. And if I say, my name is Steve, I have that downward pressure inside my chest. And this is something that takes practice that you're going to have to do regularly. Like what I tell people, and actually in the guide, it leads you through this. You do it for like at least a week of practicing yeses and nos every day to just get your signal down, to know what is your internal signal. And then you want to keep practicing it with things that are like low consequence decisions. You don't want to use this tool for big decisions right now. Like, should I do this chemotherapy? Because it's so loaded with emotions and stuff that you're not going to get a clear answer. You need to practice with things that are neutral. And like initially just these things, like I said, like I love something that you love, and then I love something that you don't love. And then my name is, those are good ways to practice just to get clear on what is your signal. The one thing that I will say in general for people is their yes tends to feel good. It's like a sigh of relief, like an expansion, an opening, a groundedness, like a nice fullness in their heart. Tends to be like an opening. That's generally what people describe for their yes. And then no tends to be like either a tightening or like a pushing down, or sometimes they feel kind of nervous. And you'll notice that the yes is more expansive, like yes feels good for you, and a no feels more contracted and more kind of like, oh, that doesn't feel quite right. And so you practice that for like a week. And once you have those signals down that you know what your yes and no is, then you can say, my body wants avocado for lunch, or whatever it is. It could be anything. And then you tune in and you see what your body does. And you can use it for little decisions like that that are not consequential. And I would usually do that for like another week before I would start doing it with big questions that were more emotionally charged. So that's the way that you guys can tap in. Again, I'm going to link the free guide so then you have this information and you can practice this on your own. But a few things to know about intuition is that if you are in fear or any other strong emotion, actually even like strong positive emotions, joy, excitement, it can cloud those signals in your body. So you want to get yourself really neutral and clear before you would ask questions, because most of the time people want to know, the answers to big questions, right? You don't need to know, like, my name is Katie. Of course, you know that. What we're trying to do is we're trying to learn those signals so that then you can use it for the big questions. But if you're going to ask big questions, like, should I do this? And also that's another thing is you don't want to say, should I? Because there's no should, right? Like then you're basically putting something in there that is, it confuses it. You want to say something like, let's just take Taxol. Let's just take a chemotherapy. Taxol is in the highest good for my body, or is in my best interest to take this Taxol therapy. Could be whatever. You fill in the blank. I'm just using that as an example. But you want to be very clear, like emotionally. You don't want to be in fear. You don't want to bring that in because that's going to cloud the information that you get. And then when you ask it, you want to say, is this in my highest good? Does my body want this? Those are good neutral questions that don't put you in like the should or I have to or, that kind of thing, because basically you can cloud your answers. You want to use something like, is this in my highest good to do this? Or does my body want this? Those are good questions to ask. This is a practice. Tapping into your intuition is very powerful. As you can see from Kelly Turner's work, that this is one of the things that people did to achieve radical remissions. And so if you can develop this muscle and strengthen it so that you can use your intuition on your journey, in your healing, and also in your everyday life, not only will it get you results that are aligned with your highest good, but I'll tell you, it's a lot more fun. than like rationally trying to make the decisions. And I will tell you also that a lot of times there are decisions that, you have several choices, that there's pros and cons on either side, right? And if you do the pros and the cons, the rational, like things can be kind of even, but in different ways. And your intuition is a way to cut through that and really tap into, what is your body asking for? What is it that your intuition is guiding you towards? So it's a way to cut through all of that like logical decision making. And I'm like, you guys know this if you've been listening to my podcast, is I talk about, you do want to like get the pros and the cons, and you want to gather all that information so that you have it. So you're always making informed decisions, but do not discount your intuition. And if you go in and you see a doctor or you see a provider that like gives you the EBGBs, like makes the hair on the back of your head stand up, or they say something that just really puts you on notice, gives you that clenched feeling, that like really, strong feeling, don't ignore that. Because as we know, when we ignore it, then oftentimes we regret it down the road. And so I want you guys, this is a balance between using our brain, right? Like getting information and gathering information so that we're informed, but then using our intuition to guide us once we're informed. So that's my little lesson on intuition. I hope that that is helpful for you. And like I said, we're going to include the guide so that you guys can practice this on your own. I would love to hear from you if you guys have any stories about following your intuition. You guys can leave us a note on social media. But this is really powerful stuff. And I would love to hear how it works for you and what's happened when you haven't followed your intuition, and then what unfolds when you follow it in this beautiful way of allowing things to unravel in a divine fashion. So thank you so much, and I will see you on the next episode. Take care. Thank you for being here today. Please enjoy a previous episode of Born to Heal. And if you found value in our conversation, please subscribe and share with someone who might benefit. Have questions? Drop them in the YouTube comments or message me on Instagram. Links are in the episode description. And remember, just like me, you were born to heal.